Hey fam, welcome to Conversations on Blessing the Block. This is our fifth session in our six-part series where we've been looking at the directives to the exile community found in Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 4 through 9. Thank you for rocking with us this summer as we discuss these important issues with the hope to better educate and inform us as a local church on the current and historical landscape of local issues we seek to address as we bless the block through our Pray Study Act teams. My name is Hanna Baker. I'm a public servant, a former elected official representing the Hillsdale and Sheridan neighborhoods of Southeast Washington, D.C., and a lover of hip hop. And I have the honor of serving Anacostia River Church as Deaconess of Community Development. And I am so excited to moderate the session this evening, Seek the Welfare of the City, a discussion on the major issues that affect quality of life here in Southeast Washington, D.C. Thank you for taking time out to join us live on Facebook or YouTube. If you are here, that means you are part of the conversation, and we want to hear from you. Use the chat feature on either platform to share your claps, your snaps, and your amens. And you can start by dropping the hashtag Seek the Welfare of DC into the chat right now. This will enter you in to win tonight's drawing of a signed copy of Berry Farm, Hillsdale, and Anacostia, a historic African-American community by Alcini Amos. Please use the chat also to ask questions of our panelists. Questions from the chat will be taken towards the end of tonight's discussion. But before I bring out our guest and dive into our conversation, I want to introduce our brother from the Boogie Down, Pastor Dennis Washington. Pastor D serves Anacostia River Church as pastor of missions and outreach. In addition to being a native New Yorker, he's a loving husband and father of four. He served our country honorably in the U.S. Air Force and longs to see the blocks and the nations come to Christ. I am grateful to call him my pastor, and I'm happy to have him share with us the biblical basis for our conversation tonight and open us up in prayer. Pastor Dennis.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Hanna, our deaconess of hip hop, Asterisk, all our panelists, and all the people that play a role in this Bless the Block series. And to those online, on behalf of the pastors of ARC, welcome. So our desire and our existence as a church is to glorify God by making disciples of Jesus Christ from the four corners of the block to the four corners of the globe. So we are zooming in on the block tonight as we're looking at seeking the welfare or shalom of the city. So we're excited to hear the conversation that is focused on issues that affect the quality of life in Southeast DC. So this idea of shalom or welfare is not something that we made up, but is here in the Bible and is found in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 7. And here's what the scripture says. It says, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." In its welfare, you will find your welfare. That's a profound statement. So for our guests who are joining us for the first time, as you may or may not know, the PSA team, Pray, Study, and Act came from a series of messages from Jeremiah 29, verse 4 through 9, that was preached just about a year ago. And in the sermon application, there were some significant parallels to the people of God then who were in exile and for the people of God today who are in exile. But notice what the word doesn't say. It doesn't say that while in exile, they should retreat and surrender. It doesn't say isolate or put your head in the sand. It doesn't say ignore what's happening in society. But what it does say is to seek and pray for the welfare of the place you are exiled to. Why? Because in it, you yourselves will find welfare. So, in other words, being a part of the change that you hope to see, being fully invested, having skin in the game, if you will, all for the sake of the shalom of the city. So, this idea of welfare, shalom, is broad and wide. It's a huge concept. And at its essence, it means peace and flourishing. It is the way things ought to be. So, when we hear about violence in the city, the school to prison pipeline statistics, 6-year-olds being shot and killed, economic and political suppression, oppression, and depression. These are things that are not the way things ought to be. It's not normal, nor should it be normalized for communities like Ward 7 and 8. And as Christians, we recognize that sin has ruined shalom, both with God and with one another. And this is why Jesus Christ came, to bridge the gap and to bring peace between God and man and with one another. That's what we believe. That's what we preach. Christ crucified and resurrected for the forgiveness of our sins. And that's good news. So the question we have to answer is, until we get to heaven, how are we to live as exiles on earth? And this passage gives helpful insight. Seek and pray for shalom. And yes, again, as I said, it's a broad and wide subject, but in all these discussions, and in this one in particular, as PSA teams, we want to find our lane in running it. And that lane for some may be played out in restorative justice, crime prevention, economic and political advocacy, involvement or investment. And for those who are new to the church, a couple of previous examples of the way ARC has partnered with the shalom of the city is when we did our Easter Bless the Block meal outreach. We partnered with Open Crumb, a small business on Good Hope Road, where we purchased meals from them to provide to the neighbors during the pandemic and share the good news of hope found in Jesus' resurrection. May there be more of that. We also hosted job fairs in the community in conjunction with Flourish Now, in hopes to see recidivism decrease and dignity restored through earning and honest living by connecting employers with those returning citizens from prison. So my hope is, in these examples that I just named, that it would be fuel to get the juices flowing, that we would be encouraged that the Lord has been at work, that he is at work, and by his grace, he will continue that work as we seek the welfare of the city. But it starts with prayer. So let's look to the Lord as we prepare for our time together. Father, we do thank you, and we do give thanks for all things. In particular, tonight, we pray for our panelists and those working behind the scenes, Lord, to make this happen. We ask, Lord, that you will prepare those who are listening, their hearts and their minds to hear. Help us not to see ourselves as saviors of the neighborhood, but those who enter in to seek and pray, in order that we would see our role in the shalom of the city. Lord, we all need you. Help us to overcome an us versus them mentality, but rather teach us to love with the community, to serve with our neighbors, and to partner with others in such a way that we see our welfare tied in the welfare of the neighborhood. May we be a people known both for being ambassadors of Christ, for shalom with God, and for shalom for the city. And God, we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you all.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor D. As he noted, our scripture for tonight is Jeremiah 29:7, which states, "But seek the welfare of the city, for where I've sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." Wherever you live, it's undeniable that your quality of life is bound up in the welfare of your surroundings. Advances in technology has made it easier, particularly the automobile, to detach from where you live, but the principle still holds. You cannot live in a locale and remain unaffected by your surroundings. Over the past few weeks, we've taken a deep dive into housing and food, marriage and families, and we've also looked at the history of our neighborhood here, Anacostia. But tonight, we'll spend our time looking at current issues that are impacting quality of life in our community. When I say quality of life, as Pastor Dennis mentioned, it is a very broad ranging topic, but I mean an individual's perception of their position in life in relation to their goals, expectations, standards, and concerns. Standard indicators of quality of life include wealth, employment, environment, physical and mental health, education, recreation and leisure time, social belonging, religious beliefs, safety, security, and freedom. As you can see, welfare encompasses a wide range of topics, but let me help sharpen it a little bit for Anacostia. As a reminder, Anacostia is located in Ward 8 in the southeast quadrant of Washington, D.C. The 220 zip code, which Anacostia is largely made up of, is 94% Black or African American. The median household income in this zip code is $36,000 for Black families, which is compared to $91,000 district wide. Unemployment in a neighborhood sits around 15%, compared to just 7% district wide. The average life expectancy here in Ward 8 is 72 years old, compared to 87 years old in the wealthier, whiter Ward 3. Almost 75% of our neighbors here have older than 25 have never graduated from college, and 14% have never completed high school. There are 41 public schools located in Ward 8. Ward 8 also has the highest number of students living within its boundaries. Conversely, there are only 2 sit down restaurants in Ward 8, pointing out the dearth of leisure and social options for the large youth population. At 31% of local industry is healthcare and social assistance organizations. And since January 1st of this year, 103 murders have taken place in the district, 39 of which have occurred in Ward 8, 8 of which have occurred within Anacostia. From this brief snapshot, you can imagine the layers of complexity of intersecting each of those statistics. Our hope this evening is to have a wide ranging conversation focusing in on 3 key areas of public safety, education, and economic development. And to that end, I am joined by an incredible panel of guests this evening. Our first guest is Lindsay Arpaio, who was recently appointed Chief of Staff to the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice. Prior to that, she served as General Counsel for the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, or DYRS, and Interim Director of that agency. Lindsay has nearly a decade of experience in district government with an emphasis on agency operations, policy review, and process restructuring. At DYRS, she served as lead attorney for the agency as they ended the 35-year court oversight in the Jerry M. lawsuit. Lindsay holds a law degree from Georgetown University Law Center and a bachelor's degree from Brown University. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Our next guest is Troy Dante Prestwood. He's a community architect, a change agent, and media commentator. He's an award-winning CEO of the Prestwood Group, a full-service media and business consultancy based here in Southeast DC. Troy has previously served 2 terms as chair of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8A and is currently serving as chair of the Ward 8 Democrats. Troy is a 4th-generation Washingtonian and a first-generation college graduate, earning a bachelor's in arts degree in political science and journalism from Howard University and a master's of arts in digital journalism and public affairs from American University. Troy, thank you for being here.
Great to be back on with you again, Hanna. It's been
Always a pleasure to be with you, Troy. And next, we're joined by Dr. Carlene Reed. Carlene was elected Ward 8 representative on the DC State Board of Education in 2020. Carlene has 15 years of experience as a special educator, and she has started her education career as a speech therapist. Carlene served in roles with DC Public Schools as well as the state superintendent of education. She holds a bachelor's degree in communicative science disorders from Hampton University, the other HU, and a master's degree in speech language pathology from Florida State University, and a doctorate degree in education from Drexel University. Carlene, we're so glad to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you, and to the Anacostia River Church for holding this series of conversations. So thanks.
Thank you. Fam, please drop a hand clap into the chat to welcome our guest this evening. All right, let's dive into our questions for this evening. My first question is for everyone, but Lindsay, I'm going to start with you. Excuse me. From your perspective, what is the most pressing quality of life issue that's negatively affecting the residents here in Southeast, and why?
I mean, in the space that I sit in, I'm in the public safety space, right? And so, my background is public health, my undergraduate background. And so there's this combination between public health and public safety. And so, from my perspective, public safety is public health, right? Like we need in order for anything else to happen, education, workforce development, home ownership, all of the things which you discussed, Hanna, that are what people consider quality of life. People need to feel safe. And so I think that right now it'd be no surprise to anybody who is in Ward 8 that people don't feel safe, and that's legitimate, right? Like that you are right, that gun violence is something that and it's one, indicator, but one that we're very focused on. And so from my seat, a key issue that we're focused on is safety, right? We can say that children need to be able to play and go to school, but if we can't get them to go there because they can't cross specific neighborhoods, right? Or, because there's crew beefs or otherwise, then all of the resources that we want to give or have in the city are going to be stymied. So I don't think it's a surprise based upon where I sit for the past decade in DC government space, that public safety is a critical issue facing residents in Ward 8 right now.
Definitely. Troy, what are your thoughts on that? What do you feel is the most pressing quality of life issue that's affecting us negatively here in Southeast?
Yes, thanks for the question. I largely agree with Lindsay here as well. I think public safety is indeed a tremendous threat to everything that we hold near and dear here in Ward 8. But when I was thinking about this question, the public safety is certainly a big part of it, but at the center of it all, for me at least, is poverty. We have a situation here in our city where we literally have drawn a map that has, folks who are the haves and the have-nots, and they're on either sides of the river. Yeah, exactly. That's why we call it east of the river. But, in other cities across the country, they say, other side of the tracks, those type of things, right? It's the same exact thing here. I mean, we have pockets of prosperity in Ward 7 and Ward 8, but we have large pockets of poverty that, you mentioned earlier about the, the average income. While we have pockets of prosperity, the average income is so vast and it's low, is that it brings that average down. And so poverty. So the public safety pops out from that, right? The fact that we're in a food desert, that's part of that. The issues around health. Nowhere east of the capital can a woman have a baby, right? Again, that's part of the health. And it's all connected to poverty. We have the trifecta, right here in our ward. When we think about public safety, gun violence, I heard the pastor say earlier about the young lady, the young girl, 6 years old. And if we don't think about poverty, how we can get really a grip on that, we're going to continue, in my estimate, to continue to have the perpetuation of the public safety issues, the perpetuation of the educational issues that we have in our ward, the development issues, all of those things that will continue on if we don't address poverty for once and for all.
Thank you, Troy. Carlene, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I have to agree with Troy. I was thinking access to meaningful career and life opportunities. When you have a job that's bringing in a certain amount of money that can look out for you and your family, I don't think you're that person who's going to be willing to shoot up a block. Or when you have a job or a career that's meaningful to you, you know, it really pushes you, it makes you get up every day. When you have access to that, I don't think it would push you to want to sit on the corner for hours and hours making scraps compared to the person that owns that block truly makes. So I really think that, you know, how do we expose, maybe education is a piece of it, like expose, but also give access to just careers and life experiences that channel some of this energy, right? Some of this, what we're seeing is an entrepreneurial spirit that needs to be challenged in a different way, but they just know, you know, I can go back to selling drugs because that's easier access. I know I can get a revenue that way. Versus, you know, the employment field or a job might be something that is less easy to access because I might have a record, or it's, you know, strenuous in regards to the hours that I have to work, doesn't work for my family. So I think we just have to figure out as a city, how do we channel some of this energy? I do believe a piece of it too is, you know, what you are willing as yourself, you know, to, you know, access in regards to resources, et cetera. But I also think that sometimes society, you know, especially our capitalistic society, makes it a little too easy for individuals to turn to illegal activities or guns, because it's easier to make a living that way versus making a living that actually builds and promotes community. I mean, it almost seems that, you know, when we're seeing individuals who are, again, on the blocks that are causing, or that on the blocks that are troublesome, it's individuals who look different from our 94% of African American community who are thriving from, you know, the opportunities in our community versus the individuals that actually live in our community, can't access to have a building, own a building, run a business, own a home. So I want to see more access for the residents and individuals who truly live and are from this ward, our communities.
Carlene, while we're with you, tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing with the State Board of Education, and what are your hopes to impact students? Because, you know, Troy brought up the important issue of poverty, and you talked about the pipeline of having meaningful education. We know that meaningful careers, we know education is a key part of that. So tell us a little bit about your work with the State Board of Education and how you hope to impact particularly the students here in Ward 8.
Sure. So full civic engagement, the State Board of Education looks at our learning standards. We are basically a sounding board for the residents of the city related to education. We used to be called the school board for some individuals who are DC through and through. That kind of changed, I think, in 2007. We're more of a policy making body, but for my work, I truly like to use this role to get into the community and be able to amplify the concerns around education. I think one of the biggest things for our ward around education is going to be our literacy rates. Right now, about 79% of our students don't read proficiently. Now, granted, I also have my own little biases around some forms of standardized testing, but with that significant percentage, somewhere in there has to be the truth. And we see that flesh out with, if you can't read, it's hard for you to comprehend. You can't teach yourself. It's a difficult time bringing in information and learning information. And we see it trickle down. Again, going back to the unfortunate situation of the 6-year-old girl, I had a neighbor who went on that block and talked to an individual who was hanging out. And this individual had a hard time expressing himself, right? We often see a lot of our students who have had a history of special education are unjustly rolled into the youth and criminal justice system, where it's truly a learning need. And that learning need has gone so long that, again, the individual is, they end up having only really limited options in regards to how they can provide a living for themselves and their families. So I really push, we can get the literacy rates up, working with our State Board of Education to create a comprehensive learning literacy plan, for our city, so that we can raise the literacy rates. And it's not just Ward 8 that has a high percentage of difficulty with literacy. It's across our city. And for DC to have as much money and resources as we do, we should be thriving in a variety of fields of education, so that eventually individuals can leave our educational system, not with just a diploma and I completed the 12th grade, but education for life.
Yes.
Absolutely agree. Troy, do you have some other thoughts on education here in our city? I know that you're involved.
I was just in the background nodding and agreeing and snapping fingers like, yes to all of that. That's all.
Me too.
I commend my Ward 8, I call her school board rep because I'm old school. I commend her for the work that she's doing and the attention that she's bringing to this very important issue around education. Again, I mentioned it earlier, but it is tied to poverty. If you want to get out of poverty, you need education. But one of the reasons why we have a lot of poverty is due to a failed education system. We have a lot of work to do here in our ward, but I'm hopeful because there are people who want to do the work. You just saw Dr. Reid there earlier. And even the church, which is located, at least right now, in Ward 8. Of course, Anacostia has shifted boundaries over the years between 6, 7, and 8. But regardless, it's your neighborhood, and there's people in that church that want to do more work here. So I am hopeful for the future. I still know that we have to do a lot of work right now in the present in order for us to achieve those things that are so important if we want to really bless the block and change the narrative in our community.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that, Troy. Lindsay, I know you previously worked as general counsel and interim director at the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. So you saw youth at the other end of the spectrum, let's say. Tell us a little bit about your role there at DYRS and the trends that you really saw in that sector.
Yeah, so just so people know what DYRS is, the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services is the district's juvenile justice agency. And so we operated in two spaces. The front door, so when young people have found themselves early on in their interactions with the justice system, we did run the detention facility and were with them in that period when they were going through the process of their case, working its way through. And then once they have found their way deeper into the system, DYRS is also the deep end agency. And so, the mission of the agency is to provide comprehensive, really rehabilitative services to youth and their families, with an idea that our young people and their families are strengths to their community, understanding that their behaviors have harmed the community of which they're a part of, and helping them to find ways to understand that and to restore relationship, right, with themselves, with their families, and with their community through a whole host of rehabilitative services. And that includes everything people have described, right, like workforce development, education, mental health and behavioral health services, right, medical care, vocational training, all of the things that we could think of in a really kind of individualized way to help our young people hopefully not reoffend, and to support their families and communities from which they come from, because they're only with us for a finite period of time. They're returning to communities. And so we also really were invested in partnering with the community to uplift the community itself, because we would say the answer is in the community, but to be a government partner to bring resources to bear and to support families and communities. And so in the juvenile space, there's a lot of things going on right now. Young people have a lot. The pandemic has been disproportionately difficult on young people who are already having difficult situations going in. We talked about education, and truancy is a large sort of red flag, if you will, for potential involvement in the juvenile justice system. And our already sort of, not great truancy rates have gone through the roof for certain young people who, a year and a half really of being at home and various things like that, where they just didn't necessarily even have the access to Wi-Fi and the things necessary to keep up, cause them to be out in the streets and in situations we just really didn't want them to engage in. Our young people, there's gun violence in itself, and then the gun violence is the result of so many of our young people carrying weapons, right? Because of, for any number of reasons, a feeling of safety, peer influence, all of those things. But these are teenagers without a great deal of, high-powered weaponry in the hands of teenagers doesn't necessarily go well. And so there's a lot of those issues going on. And so there's, we went around to communities in Ward 7 and 8 one day, just as an executive team, because we want to understand where our young people are from. And I think that we were really struck by how many of the different neighborhoods, from Clay Terrace to Lincoln Heights to Kenilworth, there really wasn't anything for our young people to do. Right. And so that's no excuse. Obviously, we want our young people to be accountable, but we need to give them pro-social, positive things to actually do. If we don't want them standing on basketball courts or in alleys playing craps or playing with guns or whatever. And so, there's a whole host of things going on. I mean, I think those are some of the things that we're seeing in the juvenile space. And I think it's really just a microcosm in some respects of what you're seeing in public safety space kind of across the board is the same things that our young people are facing, our slightly older young people still are facing. Hanna, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think that's so critical in being able to provide resources and activities for our young people. I know in my day job, it's something I hear often, and we don't have enough recreational spaces for our young people within the communities. I know that. Even here in Anacostia, there's currently a capital campaign to be able to bring a new recreation center to this area of the ward, because there hasn't been one. I was shocked to find out why there wasn't one recently in this book that I keep on telling everybody that they need to read, Berry Farm, Hillsdale, and Anacostia, Historic African American Community. It seems as though that back in the 50s and 60s, when there was a community push to have a recreation area in the community, the white residents of then white Anacostia decided that because they knew that eventually the space would be integrated, they decided not to actually petition the federal government in order to have a space placed there. So that's why we don't have a recreation center. We don't have a recreation ground in Anacostia now, where there would be a recreation center that could be built or rebuilt. And so I think we cannot discount the legacy of systematic racism in our city, and thinking about how we do that. So how do we break down those walls? Nobody could look at DC and say that there's not a lot to do here, that there's not a lot of options, there's not a lot available. If you're looking at it in a objective way, but in neighborhoods in Southeast and Northeast, east of the river, it seems as though there's this wall. How do we break down these walls and get youth involved in more and get them more access to the city?
Can I address? I mean, I don't want to ignore the panel, even though I know someone went away. You know what? Unequivocally am a believer, and I'll say this, that when it comes to one of the things that we grounded our work in at DWRS is love. And love, we would ask ourselves the question, what would a loving parent do? Which is an odd thing to hear a government agency, especially one in juvenile justice, right? Like, what does it look like, right? What would it look like for us to permeate love into public policy? It was a question we asked over and over and over again. And we said a loving parent would do many things, right? A loving parent loves, a loving parent disciplines, right? A loving parent guides. And so all of those become the pillars of how we engage or otherwise, right? If we're coming from a place of love, we certainly understand and acknowledge all of the multiplicity of issues that have brought our young people, our families, and our community where they are: racism, poverty, injustice, lack of mercy, a decentralizing of the church, right? Which was a pillar, because poverty isn't just a financial poverty, it's also spiritual poverty. And we have to address that as well, right? Like that those are things we have to, that we don't necessarily talk about in a government space, but poverty is a multi-pronged thing. So I would just say, I see that question of, do we hold young people and our communities accountable? Yes. We cannot blame everybody. We can't, Naya was a 6-year-old child, likely shot by someone who looked very much like us. And we have to own some of what we're doing to ourselves, but doing that with an understanding of how we came to this place, because you cannot unravel, and you cannot, from a place of love and true justice, which looks like mercy, and grace, and accountability, really get to a place where you can understand why there's a devaluing of life generally. Like, why have we placed such a low value on our lives and the lives of others without asking, some of those questions? Like, you can't just divorce it from, there's a legacy of racism that has caused deep roots of poverty, that have caused demoralization and a lack of hope and a lack of opportunity. So I just wanted to say that, because I saw, and I think those are legitimate things to say or ask.
I totally agree, Lindsay. And thank you so much for responding to our guests that are listening live. As you can see, our panelists can see the questions that are coming in and see the comments, and we're listening, and we care, and we want to be able to address those, because this is why we're having this conversation. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for taking the moment to be able to do that. But how can we, there's so much in that question, and in being able to think about so how do we help to encourage particularly our young people to be able to take more advantage of the wonderful city that we live in, and being able to support them in community, and not in acting as a loving parent, but not being their parents.
I mean, can I just say, like, one of the things that we have found, so we had a lot of different programs and things that we're building out in the city, right? Because we found there was one program that you'll hear a lot of people talk about in our space, Credible Messengers, right? And Credible Messengers is like mentoring plus, because what we understand is that people from the same communities with often the same lived experiences have ability to help those who are having a hard time accessing the system or trusting the system for many reasons. They can serve as a bridge. And so we literally employ many people who wouldn't be employable otherwise, right? Like people who have criminal backgrounds, who, some with very significant ones who really they understand where our young people are coming from, because this is their community. This is like, they can see ahead down the road where the young people are going. We don't substitute them in for the services and supports that we know are needed, right? Like mental health and all of these assessed supports, right? Like we do assessments. But what we say is that this is a relationship. We can't just automatically ask the community to trust us just because we're the government and have resources. We have to build relationship. And so that's really somewhat where consistency, like what builds relationship? Consistency, doing what you say you're going to do. If we make promises to the community, we show up. And I think that's true whether it's a government entity or anybody, right? Like building relationship, such that when the time comes to connect young people with things that are more positive for them to do, they trust you to do it. They'll listen to what you say, they'll go with you or otherwise. And so, I think some of that is relationship building. And so helping them access is knowing what the resources are, which is a little tricky because it's a complex system. And then building the type of consistent relationships with young people, family, community, which you're doing, many of you, this is your communities, right? such that you go with, or you help be the bridge, or you continue to walk through the whole time, not just like you can go there, but come alongside with me, which is a biblical model, right? Like way of discipleship, right? Like in the Bible, where it's like, walk with me, I'll walk with you, like walk with me as we become more Christ-like. I think that's the same thing in the public safety, or, in any space, really. So
I was thinking, if it's okay to chime in, allowing youth as much as possible to take ownership, plan, engage in what they see for their community. So something, Hanna, that I remember you and Troy before leaving or stepping down from the ANC was, you had a student from Anacostia, I think her high school, her name was Japan, who was mentioning we wanted, she was like, we want our rec center right at our school so we don't have to leave. They, lost a student to gun violence and had a rally around solutions that they posted. Being able to jump in and provide buy-in, give them buy-in. So they're giving us the ideas, we provide them the resources or act on their ideas so that when they see it come to fruition, one, they know that their engagement was not in vain, but two, it increases the likelihood of them actually wanting to be a part of that solution. The other piece of that, I think, is also, which I think with some of the just destruction of our communities, getting back to the connection to elders, credible sources in our community. We really need to define for ourselves what are the standards that we hold as a collective. I know sometimes, we go with the old school of and I'm 37, but I remember walking home from elementary school and my neighbor calling my aunt, who wasn't really my aunt. She was another neighbor who was responsible for taking care of me until my parents got off of work late at night. How do we, use our systems such as the church, such as our community civic organizations to get just some of those standards that we had back into like a collective set of standards that we all agree upon? I feel like a lot of times there's outside forces that say, oh, this is what your community needs to do, and this is what your community needs to believe in, and this is what we should fund, and this is what we should not fund. But what solutions are emerging from the community? I think if we could get on the same page along a collective standards of this is what we're going to support, this is what we're not going to support, and some element of that will be helpful too, and instill it in our youth.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that, Carlene. So you're saying that there's a role for us to play here in the community, that our presence in the community matters. Thank you. I hope all my fam in Anacostia River Church is hearing that and taking that to heart. We have a role to play in this community, and our presence does matter. And so I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I want to bring Troy into this conversation. I really want to hear about his experience as a small business owner, and tell us about what that's been like for you, because we've talked a lot about things that negatively affect quality of life, but businesses are one of those is often seen as something that is intrinsically good for a neighborhood. And so tell us about your experience as a small business owner and what supports or barriers that are there to help or hinder you and your success as a business owner.
Thanks for that question. So I've been in business since 2009, and I went full time or so back in 15 after leaving a job that was, well, let's just say it was time to move on. So I work out of my home. I mean, you can see I'm in my home office right now. But of course I work, wherever I'm needed as a consultant. So I have a different business model than I think the businesses that we tend to see in retail spaces. But nevertheless, a business is a business, because at the end of the day, the question is, if you're an entrepreneur, can you build a business and make money and stay in the city of your birth, or do you have to move on and go elsewhere, as many people have? So for me, I've tried to stay here. I've tried to stay local, build locally, hire from the community, depending on what my events are or whatever I'm called to do. I try to bring in those folks whom I've met through my relationships here in the ward and in the community. And so on one hand, it's been positive because I could just lean on the people who I know, again, the relationships that I've already have, and bring those folks into the work that needs to be done. On the other hand, during the pandemic, for example, where my type of work basically dried up, when you're downtown dried up too, but let's just, for the sake of argument, when you're next door, when you're working with other people, if you're next door to another business, you can lean on one another. You can help prop each other up. Well, we don't have that if you are working from home, or you're working as a consultant per se. At least I didn't have that. So that was perhaps last year was certainly one of the worst moments, I think, for me as a small business owner. And perhaps, as you well know, for many other small business owners as well, if they weren't in essential business. With that being said, though, I want to just give kudos to the district government because they did offer some incentives for people like myself, which helped to keep us afloat. There was some grant money that was made available. There were other workshops and other informational sessions out there that was geared toward serving small businesses. Because here's the thing: if we lost every small business from during the pandemic, then you wouldn't have anything to rebound from right now, which is what we're seeing. So it was important, and I just want to thank them because they did put, despite the fact they were facing potential record shortfall in tax revenue, they still put money in toward their businesses. They got federal money, obviously, that came in to help with that, but they also got shortchanged at that time. We could talk more about the federal government later. But the point is, as someone who's, I guess, in a hub zone, which is what Anacostia is, I mean, we're hopeful that we can continue to, I think, create new opportunities, build more businesses. I think another way we can talk about how we can solve a lot of our issues here is to, and I think Dr. Reid said it earlier, and Lindsay did too, give people an opportunity to create their own businesses, legal businesses, right? Where they can actually hire people and pay taxes and put money aside and pay for Social Security that will come in handy down the road, and invest and all those things. That's what we have to offer. And there are people out here and programs out here that's trying to do that, but they're scaling up. And I think the more we bring attention to them, like the Ward 8 Community Economic Development, I think they call it the WCED. For example, they're trying to do this type of work, but we have to help support them. We have to make sure we're helping them, get the work done. So as a business person, absolutely, I love being here in Ward 8. I see the great potential that's here. The talent is here. The potential is here in terms of, space that we can build out. But we got to get there, and it's a slow road. Let me just put it like that.
Agreed. I think that there are lots of great programs and resources available, particularly through the Department of Small and Local Business here in DC that supports business. There's resources and grant programs for returning citizens and other options that are available to help support people who are interested in entrepreneurship or creating small businesses. It's just there really isn't. It seems as though no matter what room we're in and we're speaking about this, there's always a large segment of people that say, "Oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, I didn't know this was available." And so there has to be a better way of communicating the options and resources that are available, so that people can take advantage of this and be able to build the kind of lives legally that they want to live.
Right. But forums like this, the more we talk about it, the more we say, "Hey, there are programs out here for returning citizens," for example. There their programs at the Infrastructure Academy, which we still currently have in our ward. There are things that I know I drop little hints here and there.
All conversations we've had, Troy.
I know. I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody. I'm just saying, the more we do this, we have these type of conversations, the more the church, the Anacostia River Church, can be part of this conversation to get the word out about other ways. Yeah, you guys, you're saving souls, but I can't reach your soul unless I'm making sure that I can meet your basic needs, right? Food, shelter, and those things. And so, absolutely, the more we talk about these services, the better. In every forum, which I know it may be strange coming from a pulpit, but even the pulpit in the middle of a message, a sermon, is still just as important to say it there too.
Yeah, I think I'm grateful for being a part of this church, because I think we realize it's a both and approach, and it doesn't have to be either or. It can be a both and so we are talking about these issues because we want to make sure that our church members are equipped to be able to have these conversations with people that they meet out in the street, on the block, and we want to make sure that that we're able to help educate and spread the word on different sources and resources that are available, so that people can live and thrive in the city, because ultimately that's what we want to see. Speaking of living and thriving in our city, I know that there are a lot in the education space, that a lot of work that is being done on the community level, and to help enrich the landscape of education here in Ward 8. Carlene, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the parent-teacher organizations and some of the that are working to enhance education here in Ward 8?
Sure. So I'm a little biased because I live right close to Ketchum Elementary School. So I am a huge fan of folks, which I know one of your members, Jonna Turner, is literally the person that holds, I think, Friends of Ketchum together. But it's an excellent vision and standard for parent-teacher organizations in our ward. We have a few other parent-teacher organizations that are starting to emerge, which I'm very excited about. Boone has a thriving one. Johnson. It's just because you hear always that we need more PTOs, and we do. But I like telling the narrative, because sometimes hearing the story motivates other folks. So we have some burgeoning parent-teacher organizations in our ward. We have the Ward 8 Education Council. That's a entity that has a variety of parents, teachers, educators that are all together. We even have some ANCs. When you and Troy again were on our ANC, you guys ventured under your leadership and allowed us to have an education committee. I'm hoping 8A gets it back, but I know 8C has an education committee. So if I can get all 5 ANC groups to get an education committee to really funnel up some of the community issues around education, that would be awesome. My vision, and I guess I'll give you guys a sneak preview, is really to create an organization that really kind of pulls in all of our sectors of education, from childcare through adult education, from our public charter, as well as private. We do have a couple private schools in Ward 8, because what I'm learning is some of our strongest groups in the city who do a lot of advocacy don't just focus on one school. They don't just focus on one section of the city or a neighborhood. It's really either ward level or citywide. So stay tuned. I would love Anacostia River Church's support with that. But I appreciate the work that whenever you go to your service, I already see individuals who are leading the way around education and organizing around education, and are very powerful with it. Jonna does not back down when it comes to Friends of Ketchum. And I think it's just a stellar example of what other community organizations around education can be.
Amen. Amen. Shout out to my homegirl, Jonna, and all the work that her and the crew at folks are doing. That is a wonderful example of how if somebody who is involved in cares and was able to leverage resources of the organization that they have to be able to impact this community. And so I'm so grateful for her as a friend. I'm so grateful for her example of leadership. I think that is, and I think that that's what we want to see more and more of out of our church, because we know that these things make a difference within the community. So thank you so much, Carlene, for bringing that up. Lindsay, thinking more about that community-based work, I know that the district recently launched Building Blocks DC. Can you tell us a little bit more about that effort and its goals here in the community?
Sure. So one of the things that we know is that there's 151 blocks, right? The building blocks, which is about 2% of the blocks in the city that account for about 41% of the gun violence in the city. And so what, we as the district said is that we need a public health, whole government approach to gun violence, and so much so this emergency operations center. So how we operated in COVID, where, there was an emergency operations based model where it's all hands on deck across the government. That's what we have done in a first of its kind EOC in the country here in the district. And so what that means with the building block initiative is there's a couple of different things. There's place-based and people-based initiatives. And so it's about bringing the whole of the government resources, which honestly can be very complex and difficult to navigate at times, and hard for people to figure out the gaps or, what they're doing, helping to bring that to the areas most impacted currently by gun violence. Because we know if we can address some of those public health-based things that you've mentioned, educational issues, really things like neighborhood abandoned cars and some of the neighborhood cleanup issues, and then of course the mental health services, job services, all of those different things. So if we can bring those to the neighborhoods, we believe there'll be a ripple effect and a real significant impact. So then also really focusing on the people, those individuals who are really causing we believe they're people of promise. We call them people of promise, right? Who, if we address some of the underlying issues that we know, there's data and evidence-based solutions to gun violence, but all of that is partnering with the community and coming up with individualized neighborhood plans, action plans that come from the community. And then bringing those resources to bear. And so there's all sorts of different things going on with that now, from actually some of the things I described, like, cleaning up the neighborhoods, bringing DPW in and DDOT to clean up neighborhoods, to bringing DBH in, to really, there's been a significant investment by the city. There's about $59 million that will be in the next budget cycle. And I think it was about $15 million in this fiscal year, to really help coordinate this and make sure that there's like a whole host of resources available for the communities that across all 8 wards, but really in focusing in on those 151 blocks. And so currently, one kind of example of what we did is in partnership, and this kind of shows how this works. After speaking with the community, there's so many people who are doing the work, right? The work of, meeting the needs of their neighbors. We wanted to uplift that both at an individual level and systemic, larger level. So in a partnership with DYRS, BBDC, or the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and then a long-term community partner, Progressive Life Center, put out a solicitation for about, I think this go round, it was $750,000 worth of grants this go round, and there'll be another 1.5 million in the next fiscal year to some larger grants for organizations that are really doing the work in these affected areas. Those are $50,000 grants, and then individual grants to everybody who has a great idea, or to people who have, been meeting the needs of the community and wanting to come alongside and support that on a continuing basis. And so, so I think that's kind of like a general picture of what we're doing there.
Got it. Thank you. I think that that is a really innovative approach, and I hope that the all hands on deck model really serves as a to help mitigate the impact that these blocks tend to have in crime within the community. And I hope that it serves to really help and in bringing the resources that are needed to the block. Because, like you said, it's not just crime. Sometimes it's DPW and making sure that it's trash and litter free, that there's no place for hiding, that we have adequate street signage, that we have all aspects of district government is involved with really addressing the crime issues there. And so I hope that this is a really effective model. Troy, I know you know a lot about these conversations. I know we've had a lot of these conversations and how we need to bring all those resources into the community. But as a former advisory neighborhood commissioner, I know you got to also advise on a lot of economic development projects in the neighborhood. Tell us a little bit about some of the changes that we could expect to see here in Anacostia over the next few years.
Yeah, I'm really excited, Hanna, and Dr. Reid and Lindsay, and to your audience that's watching. I'm really excited about what's coming to Ward 8, and the work that we worked on. How we toiled in the earth, basically, to try to make some of these things happen. I was just at the groundbreaking of the second phase of Reunion Square last week. And it felt strange. We were no longer a commissioner there, but I was invited by one of the new commissioners to come and be there to see the work that we put into that. And that was a big, massive undertaking, because it had, broad support by members of the community, but it also had some folks who felt it wasn't inclusive enough. And I think the package that we put together, working with the council member's office, working with DMPAD, the mayor and the developers, I think it's a pretty strong package that we did, Madam Vice Chair, as we worked on that together. And of course, with Commissioner Jones and all the commissioners, quite frankly, everyone contributed to helping that to become a success. And so we were able to break ground on that this past Friday, actually. And so, or maybe it was Thursday. I don't remember what day it was. Nevertheless, the point is that project will deliver in a couple of years. And we're talking about the new headquarters for the DC Department of Health. And we mentioned earlier about the health disparities that our ward has. Well, that's going to be, even though all the resources are here in our community, we know we can do a better job of getting the word out. But the fact that the headquarters would be here, I think, does make a big difference, right? We have the underway right now. Those of you who drive past Good Hope Road and MLK, right there on that corner there, the MLK Gateway project, right there on that corner, will be a Capital One cafe type of bank there, where you basically will have a place where you can meet people. I can come out of my back cave here in my home office and meet people at that Capital One cafe and conduct business, and again, be around other business oriented people. So that project is going to deliver really at the end of this year. Enlighten, which is a Black-owned cybersecurity company, will be headquartered there, along with some other folks. There will be a space there for a local restaurant. We're excited to know that one of our very own here, Darrell Gaston, who's the former commissioner right here in Ward 8, will have a space there for his new venture. So I'm excited that we're beginning to activate these spaces that have long been vacant for far too long. And then you see new housing coming up and down Good Hope Road. You see new housing coming up and down MLK. By the way, that Reunion Square project will deliver more housing for our seniors in particular. But then it's also going to bring out Ward's first hotel. We, talk about deserts. Well, we don't have a place for people to stay unless they do an Airbnb. And so imagine what that could do. And then, of course, to have a training program be part of that around hospitality and tourism. So we've done a lot of work, and we will see these things pay off. But legacy is about planting those seeds that you get to see later, or you may not get to see, but it will come later. And I'm hopeful that all of these things that will come, as long as we are mindful that we must be inclusive, we must be respectful of the culture that's already here and that is part of Washington, D.C. And I think that's been pretty much, it's been pretty omnipresent for a while now, that we are providing opportunities for jobs and for careers that would be, life sustaining, and you can build a family off of. You can afford to stay here in Washington, D.C. As long as we keep our eyes on that prize, then there's no stopping us. From here, you can hop, skip on over to St. Elizabeth, where you have all the new housing coming, and the housing is already there. You have the entertainment district that's there. And the possibility of what that could bring to that long neglected community as well. So there's a lot of excitement coming, but we need people to be patient for that to happen. In the meantime, though, there's still work for us to do. We have to get out here and save lives so that they can be around for these developments when they actually emerge. We have to save our young people. We have to save everyone from opioids. And of course, we got to get this public safety issue under control, because that is the main thing that will threaten all of these new development projects that are coming. If we're not able to get our opioid problems under control, we're unable to get our public safety issues under control, and continue to work at better educating our citizens, then the development will all vanish once again. And then we'll be in a situation where it's disinvestment versus investment.
That is a word right there, Troy. I mean, we haven't even had an opportunity to touch on the opioid epidemic that's plaguing our streets. I know anybody who's driven up and down Good Hope Road, MLK, has seen the effects of the opioid crisis here in our neighborhood. And so that is definitely something that I know that is being aggressively addressed within the district, but there's still so much more work to be done. I'm going to pivot just a little bit for people who may not be as familiar with the issue as some, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to comment on how the fact that the District of Columbia is not a state affects your area of work. Lindsay, I don't want you to say anything too political. I don't want to get you in trouble with nobody. But I think that Troy, you can have it all. But I think that it's a issue that is unique to the District of Columbia, and in the larger national conversation, it definitely tends to get drowned out. And honestly, as somebody who living in the district, it's something that can kind of be like, well, it's just a fact of life, and we just have to deal with it. But I don't think it has to be either of those things. And so I think it's something that we should be able to talk about. We should be able to comment on, because it does affect us in a number of different ways. And so I want to give you guys the opportunity to say, to share with the audience this evening a little bit how the fact that the District of Columbia is not a state, how it affects your areas of work. And Lindsay, I know you probably have a lot to say here on in the public safety sector.
Yeah, so I mean, it's tricky. Sometimes people don't even realize just how honestly it's chopped up it is, right? And so one of the things that most states have is autonomy of their system. We in the District of Columbia, our court system is federal. So we don't have independent control over the courts. And so even things like supervision of, our young people and adults who find themselves in the system is not under the district's control. That is the federal court, or the courts, which are federal. And that is, pretrial services, CSOSA, and court social services, all of our supervision agencies. The district doesn't have any autonomy when it comes to charging even. We don't have here in the district a prison system, right? Our residents, when they are sentenced, again, by a court that is not local, they're sent across the country to Bureau of Prison locations all across the country. And one of the things that fosters successful reentry is maintaining connection to your local community. Most people are coming home at some point, and we want them to be successful upon return. And so not having any sort of control over where our people go, how they're charged, what happens with their supervision is challenging, right? It means that the interest that we may have on the district side of the house in our residents is controlled by federal. And, the other thing I would say, just as an attorney who was an attorney for the district is a long time, is even something like our budget, right? Like our budget comes from district tax dollars, but we don't have budget autonomy, right? Like our budget has to be overseen, and all of our laws overseen and approved by Congress, right? So, it's our money and our local dollars, and whether through passive approval or otherwise, we have to wait until Congress says yay or nay. And so, that's significant, right? In how our young people, adults, and how our residents do, both in, specifically in my area of public safety and justice, and then just generally, right? Like our budget and how we spend is, hopefully Congress doesn't intervene, but they certainly can if they chose to in our budget and things like that. So it's challenging.
I don't mind jumping in there. It's like, I really love, this is really good, meaty question. I like meaty questions. So the first would be in regards to education and what would the impact of statehood be? So DC is already treated like a state in the education sector in regards to how we are monitored. And we saw the unfortunate result of not being a state when the first round of the American Relief Funds rolled out, when we were short maybe millions, I believe. I'm bad at that math.
It was $757 million that the district was not given, because Congress at the time decided we should be treated as a territory when we're always treated as a state. But
yes, we are always treated as a state in regards to education. So yes, millions, that's a significant $700 million. Whew. And I think we eventually got some back, but still the fact that we were in the
Biden administration.
Yeah, but I mean, in the middle of, at the height of the pandemic, DC was cheated out of resources that we could have had immediately, and we had to dig into our coffers to address that, that shortage. The next piece of it is, I believe that I'm learning more things about, like, if we become a state, there's like almost like a state constitution. The role of the State Board of Education would be enhanced. Which right now we don't make a lot of decisions around education. Even though we are the elected body to represent education, a lot of the education decision making really falls on the executive of our city. And we've just seen a variety of impacts of that when the mayor controls every aspect of education, the superintendent, the public charter school board, I'm missing one, a DCPS chancellor. We do need some checks and balances there. Educational folks to say, like, hey, that might be a good idea, that might not be a good idea. And then the last piece of it is, it keeps other states out of our education decision making. So this year, there's been at least 2 instances. One time, I believe individuals from South Carolina, I believe Utah, wanted to jump in and make statements or basically rescind our early childhood laws. But we actually had higher standards for our early childhood providers to be in regards to preparation and education standards. They wanted to rescind that. Then our social studies standards, because of the critical race theory conversation, wanted us to basically censor our state social studies standards work. Those would be conversations that we wouldn't have to entertain if we were a state around education.
That's good. I was not aware of the input from other states on our social studies standards. I mean, I feel like that's a conversation that that Utah has no place in. And so,
especially when their standards in early childhood education system are not up to par with DC.
Well, but
that happens because we don't have voting representation in Congress, right? So when a congressman, because that's what happened here, decided to raise these in committee or otherwise, there's no local district representation. So we then have to sort of hope that we have a good relationship with our partners in Maryland and Virginia, right? Like we'll kind of take up for the district or whatever and make sure that we're not kind of, left, that they vote for us or like do something to assist us to make sure that people are not altering. There was a question, did Biden correct that? Yeah, in the American Rescue Plan Act, the shortage that the district was shorted in the CARES Act was, in fact, the Biden administration went ahead and gave the district that. And so that when Troy was talking about some of the real deep deficits that we were going expecting to go into, we've been really fortunate to have a much more stable financial position, allowing us to do a lot of the supporting of businesses and rent assistance and school assistance through both the American Rescue Plan, the American Rescue Act, and the correcting of that CARES Act situation.
Yes, and I'm going to let Troy chime in on this question because I know he has something to say.
Yeah.
Well, and do you want to address the question about district denial of the budget?
Yeah, so the district, as far as I can call within recent modern history since home rule, and I may make a mistake here, so I'm not going to go back like beyond 85. But as far as I remember, the Congress has never denied the district's budget, but what they have done is they've added what they call riders. And these riders say, yeah, we want to approve your budget, but at the same time, we're going to say that you can't spend your money on women reproductive services. You can't spend your money to curtail HIV/AIDS infection with a needle exchange program. Right now, there's a current rider that says, which hasn't been overturned yet, which says that you cannot spend money to open or to sell recreational marijuana, for example. So they approve those budgets, right? Because we have to balance our budget, unlike the federal government. States, which we are treated as a state in this instance, have to balance their budget, but they can put those riders on it. So that's exactly one of the reasons why we here in the district want district statehood. And just to the earlier question about Reunion Square, it was phase 2 of Reunion Square. And that's basically 3 buildings that they're going to be building in phases in phase 2. One of them is, again, the new headquarters for the DC Department of Health. That's going to be right there on Shannon Place and W. The next one would be an office/hotel. And then the last would be a senior or largely low income rental building geared toward our seniors.
And the home of the Anacostia Playhouse.
I don't think it's in that particular building. It could be. I don't know if it's in that particular building, but if it is, then that's the other part too. In terms of the other piece around how it impacts people like me who in the work that we need to do, I think in the ward, I think everything that Lindsay said and Dr. Reid said around, our education standards. And then, of course, the fact that public safety is a big issue here. And when we do arrest people, and let's be real, some people do need to be arrested and they need to be sent away. And when they are arrested and sent away, they are scattered throughout the entire country. And when they come home, and like Lindsay said, most of them do, they're not connected. When they come home, they don't even recognize the city anymore because the city has changed so drastically. So we have to keep them close to home. And, the worst thing I think that ever happened, that was part of the control board days back in the 90s where we closed down Lorton because it was at least close to home. And people could go and visit loved ones there. And they had training programs that the district ran to help them reintegrate back into society. I can tell you many, many stories that I hear from people who has served time at Lorton, but came back home and were excellent model citizens, for the rest of their lives. And so I think that's a big piece of it. But let's just be real. At its lowest common denominator, what does statehood give you? It gives you 2 senators, and it gives you voting member in the House of Representatives. Imagine if I'm a business person and we're talking about federal contracts and making sure that the district is getting their fair share of these contracts and bids and things like that. Well, we don't, if you don't have leverage, God bless Eleanor Holmes Norton, who's been in there for I guess about 30 years now. And she has found a way to use leverage, even when she technically don't have any to give. She doesn't have a vote. That's the leverage that you use in Congress. And so imagine if we had at least a vote in the House and then 2 U.S. senators in the Senate, what that could mean for Washington, D.C., what that could mean in terms of how we address public safety and the things that we care about, education, for example, housing, all those things that the feds have a big say in, we would have a vote in, which we currently don't right now. So,
and also things like
January, very important.
On days like January 6th, when people come to our city to wreak havoc or otherwise, it empowers us to actually react as a state would, instead of being so dependent upon other people to protect our city. Right?
And by the way, to that point, who saved the Capitol? All that tear gas that they deployed up there on the Capitol Hill. You know who had tear gas? MPD, because they have a lot of tear gas. Okay? They're real with you. So who saved the Capitol? It was the local police that did that. The DC State Police, as far as I'm concerned. And imagine, like you said, Lindsay, if we could have called up the National Guard because our governor was like, we have an emergency down here. We want to help our federal partners. Can you imagine what that would have been like? Yeah. It probably would have been a lot quicker than what it was. Yeah. But I totally agree. We have to, I think a lot of issues, is around statehood that we have to, begin to really tackle. But I can't get our residents here in Ward 8 or any other places in our city where they're facing tremendous poverty and trauma and gaps in wealth to focus on statehood if we can't meet their basic needs. So while on one hand, we got to have that track where we're talking about how do we get toward the future in terms of the governance of our city, our next state, 51st state. But on the other hand, we still got to do the work out in the community, focusing on saving lives, saving souls, because again, it doesn't matter if they're not here to experience what statehood could potentially bring to our home.
Agreed. That it definitely can be an esoteric thought if when you're hungry or when you're dealing with street violence, but it is important nonetheless. But with that, Troy, what would you say is your biggest hope to improve the quality of life for the residents of Anacostia?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I think, and I'm just listen. I saw we had advanced questions, and I was like, should I just just answer these questions and have them on standby, or should I just go with the flow? I'm going to go with the flow on this because I honestly think that what gives me great hope are the people. It's the people who live here, who toil in the earth, who call Anacostia, who call Ward 8, who call the District of Columbia home. They give me great hope because for the first time in a very long time, I'm beginning to see that folks are fed up with low expectation. They're fed up with lack of resources, being under-resourced, especially when you can look over on the other side of the shore of the Anacostia River and see the resources. Mm-hmm. And so I think people are demanding for the first time, maybe even speaking up for themselves for the first time, saying this is what we demand. We're not asking for it anymore. We're demanding that these things be done, that these investments be done, that we invest in early child education, that we bring more healthy food options to our ward. People say we have a food desert. I always say we have a healthy food desert. There's food on every block. You want food, but what type of food is it? So for the first time, we're beginning to see, I think the mayor and the council and a lot of other, agencies here coalesce around exactly what it is that we need. The health disparity. I mentioned this at the top. There's nowhere for a woman to have a baby east of the Capitol. Think about that. We have a new hospital that is on the horizon. We have some outskirts of what do you call those? Satellites campuses.
Outpatient clinics and
yeah, but not clinics per se, but like what you call
ambulatory centers, like
but something else I'm thinking here. Urgent care. Urgent care centers, those type of things that will be part of this new health system that we need to build up here. So these are the things that bring me great hope. The people who live here, who work here, who want to raise a family here, born here or not, doesn't matter. They're here and they want to make a difference. And so I'm hopeful by them. I'm hopeful by the development that we see coming that's equitable, that's inclusive, that will perhaps for the first time in a very long time give people a fair shot.
All right. Lindsay, what is your hope? What is your biggest hope to see the quality of life improve for residents here in Anacostia?
I mean, so I'll say this, I've said before, I'm a believer. And I think that I work in local government, right? Like I work for DC government, and I recognize that there are many ways in which we fall short and that we don't, meet the needs of the residents. But I also know on that side of the house that there are many, many people who deeply care about the people, the residents in every ward. And that certainly includes our neighbors in Ward 8. And so what makes me hopeful is that I really believe that we're for such a time as this people, and that God has strategically positioned people for this moment, which I think is a really specific moment in which he is bringing about justice and mercy, which looks, different than anything we've seen, that God has positioned us in government, many believers, right? And also, our partners in community to do his work, to restore all parts of our city, this city that he has called us to, right? Like we started with the verse that says, pray and I believe work for the peace and prosperity to which this city to which I've called you, because our prosperity is wrapped up in the prosperity of our city. And so I feel deeply hopeful because I believe that in many respects that God has given us a reset. And I know that can sound, however, that we're in a new season, have the ability to use all of these resources that we have right now, which is so specific in the district, to really to flip over, the timeline, to really water the seeds that have been planted for decades, and to really see a change in people's situations. And so I feel not only hopeful, but resolute that this is a specific moment in time, and that we are, people, like we call our residents in our building blocks, people of promise, that we are people of promise, and that his kingdom come and his will can be done on earth. And that that means Ward 8, Ward 7, all of the wards.
Amen to that. Carlene, for you, what is your hope?
Yes, I am dreaming no small dreams for Anacostia and Ward 8 in general. My dream or hope is that we, bring some decency to the resources that we have, whether it be, again, the food stores that we have, the level of customer service, whether it be, I don't want to do business with you through a glass a partition, or you only take cash from a very expensive ATM. I want our schools to be both the best looking on the outside, state-of-the-art looking buildings, but also the high quality of education that our students so desperately need and deserve, and systemically and historically have been shut out from. Again, just decency, so that, and this decency is inclusive of everyone, every neighbor, every person is deserving of it, because especially I keep going back to the concept of, we are 94% African American in Ward 8. We have toiled for our country. We have built this country on our backs. We have stuck with communities that were pulled apart systemically, and we have that love. So I feel like that. The investment that we give in our community, whether it be our cash investments, whether it be the love from neighbor to neighbor, that there's decency brought to what we've built between our families, between neighbors, and that we can just basically enjoy, where we live, where we breathe, where we, just engage with neighbors every day. It doesn't make sense that we have to go so far to enjoy certain things when, we have it all right here. And I'll close on, I know Troy really mentioned this, and I have to agree 1,000%. Having knocked on a lot of doors this summer, there are some wonderful people in our ward who have a vision, who have love, who are doing a lot of things for their neighbors when even they don't have themselves. And I would just love to see that love and those missions, those personal missions that people have, just amplified through the decency of resources that we have in our city.
Agreed. Thank you so much for that, Carlene. I'm going to give everyone a quick 30 seconds just to plug whatever you want to plug, social media, how we can get in contact with you, how we can find out more about your work. Super quick. Lindsay, I'll start with you.
So, listen, I'm now the chief of staff for the deputy mayor for public safety and justice. And so I'm always happy to hear from people. So, you can email me. Like, we actually really do care what our residents have to say. At least I do, and the people in our office and the chief and all the people that I work with on like a daily basis. Like, there are a lot of people who really love the city and the residents. And so we do want to hear from you. So if you have something you want to say, offer, whatever, please feel free to email me. It's lindsay.appiah@dc.gov. And so my name, first name, last name @dc.gov. Hit me up.
Carlene?
Sure. Thank you so much for Anacostia River Church for truly being progressive and hosting these conversations for our community. Looking forward to partnering with you all around the work of education. I know some of your members are already involved in it. You can reach me on social media at Carlene D. Reed. I try to push out a lot of resources about education in our schools, so please follow the page. And then you can connect with me directly at Carlene, which I think the spelling my name is right there, .reed@dc.gov. Happy to hear about any of your concerns about education. Please reach out before anything escalates so we can partner to make some solutions.
And Troy, I'll leave the last word to you.
Troy, you're muted.
It's been 18 months, 19 months that we've been doing this and there's still the mute. Let me start over. So I just wanted to thank you, Hanna, and also thank you to my fellow panelists for a really great discussion, Lindsay and Dr. Reid, and also thank you to the Anacostia River Church for holding this discussion and for the ones that you will hold in the future. I'm just going to say very quickly, you can find me on all platforms. You can just type in my name, Troy Dante Prestwood, or Troy Prestwood, or Troy Dante. It'll all come up. I'm most active politically on Twitter, and so my handle there is Troy Dante, Donte. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. My business is called the Prestwood Group. You can Google us and find out more information about what we offer as well there. And just thank you all again for this great conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so very much for being here with us tonight. It was so wonderful to chop it up with you and to talk about these deep and important issues. I'm so grateful for each of you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Fam, please show our guests some love as they exit tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Good night. All right. All right, fam. I cannot leave you without sharing some resources for you this evening. So I have a few quick recommendations for you. A couple of book recommendations this evening. The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. This takes a thoughtful academic look at the aspects of policing presents viable alternatives. It's definitely going to challenge your view of how you think about policing. So take some time and read it, and really think and pray about it as you do. Dream City: Race, Power, and the Decline of Washington, D.C. by Harry Jaffe and Tom Sherwood covers the modern political era of D.C. and really focuses in on the Marion Barry years. I know I recommended this book in our first session, but I'm recommending it again because it's just that good. This period is so critical of understanding how D.C. operates today, and so you really want to get an understanding of this by reading this book. Some other resources for you: Becoming Douglas Commonwealth is a documentary that was produced this year that really chronicles the district's decades-long fight for statehood. So if you're interested more in that in the statehood journey, please watch that documentary, Becoming Douglas Commonwealth, which would be the name of the new state if we were to be granted statehood. The Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership publishes a neighborhood economic guide, which gives a great outlook of current economic development and forecasts future economic development. And so you definitely want to go ahead and check that out if you're interested in more of the development that's coming for Anacostia and other neighborhoods around the district. Urban Institute's Greater DC is a wide variety of resources on topics that can be very helpful in thinking about different policies related here in the district. So you can check them out at greaterdc.urban.org for more information there. And then finally, Alert DC is the district's official communication system and allows you to pick the type of emergency alert you want. So if you're concerned about public safety in the area, road closures, all those kinds of public safety notices, they all come through Alert DC. And so you can sign up for that at HSEMA, that's hsema.dc.gov, to sign up for Alert DC. All right, now to the giveaway for tonight of a signed copy of Berry Farm, Hillsdale, and Anacostia, an historic African American community. Let's see who our winner tonight will be. Let's see. All right, let's try that one more again. Congratulations to Core. We'll have a copy of this for you at church on Sunday. So thank you so much for being here and for your thoughtful comments as always. We appreciate you, sis. Thank you to everyone. That brings us to the end of tonight's discussion. Please join us next time, which will be August 12th, for our final discussion in the series, Do Not Be Deceived. Our brother Colin Willis will be moderating that session, and we'll be talking about how the truth of the gospel can impact the lies prevalent in Southeast DC. That means we are talking about urban apologetics. And we are so excited because we'll be joined by a special guest. Dr. Eric Mason will be joining us for that conversation. So you don't want to miss it. Please mark your calendars and be here for that conversation. Thank you to Anacostia River Church for hosting this conversation and for your desire to seek the welfare of this city. Thanks again to our panelists, Lindsay Arpaio, Troy Donte Prestwood, and Dr. Carlene Reed. And thanks to Pastor Dennis Washington. Thanks as always to our super producer, Astrid Hacker, and our production assistant, Christian Coven. On behalf of Anacostia River Church, where I get to serve as Deaconess of Community Development, my name is Hanna Baker. Let's bless the block together, fam. Good night.